So I had mentioned that Michael Trotter came back from Iraq, and like so many veterans, he had some mental health issues, some challenges, PTSD, depression, suicidal thoughts. And those guys wove some of those issues into their earlier songs. Our interview guest this week is Mack Bailey. He was also a professional touring musician. He was with the Limelighters. He fronted a John Denver cover show. He also has suffered from depression, and music pulled him through. So he then decided to get his master's degree in neurologic music therapy, driven by his desire to learn how the brain responds to music. He now spends his time researching new healing techniques for military veterans and at-risk populations struggling with PTSD. He founded a nonprofit called Music Therapy of the Rockies, and he's here today to talk to us about the impact of his work. Please welcome to eTown, Mack Bailey. Thank you, Nick. Hey, Mack. Welcome. First, let me ask you about your gig with the Limelighters. That was more than 10 years you were with them, right?
Yes, and I did. I got to sing with all the original members. They were actually my first musical influence. That was who my dad had their albums. So
Yeah.
Glenn Yarborough was my mentor, and
You were Limelighters, not Kingston Trio.
he was Limelighters, which made me Limelighters.
Yeah, awesome. And it was a good experience being in that band and
It
touring and
was.
traveling. Yeah.
Loved the harmonies, loved the arrangements,
Yeah.
and we worked with Glenn on his last time on stage, and it was he had dementia, so it was a difficult. It was difficult making sure that he looked as good as he could possibly look and sound as good as he could sound. It was such an honor for me to help him leave the stage.
You were his Lady Gaga to his Tony Bennett.
Yes.
Yeah. How did this transition happen from traveling and touring and playing music to studying about brain function?
It was when the economy fell out in 2007, 2008, and the Limelighters were kind of put in a position of it hit our demographic very hard, and so we, a lot of people were trying to figure out how they were going to make it work, and I as a touring musician, always had that fear of what happens if that gig isn't there anymore, and what do you have to turn back on, and so I decided to go back to school at the age of 50 and got my master's in music therapy, and greatest gift I ever gave myself.
That's cool. That's cool. And are you somebody who was also, curious about the sort of physical role that music played on your own mental health or state of mind?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's in my research since I've been doing this. There's two real major parts. I believe that trauma, PTSD, depression, they're as neurologic as they are psychological, and so that we try to address both aspects, and I think there's a way neurologically to put the brain in the best position possible to then do the therapy and do the work.
Yeah. Well, talking about the therapy and the work, tell me the kinds of situations you find yourself in, the kinds of people you're working with. What do you do?
We work with veterans, and we work with Thistle Farms, an organization out of Nashville that works with addiction and survivors of sex trafficking. And we have a 3-part program. We do mindfulness exercises to just give them coping skills, and then I present each one of them with a brand new Breedlove guitar, and I teach them coping skills with the guitar, but they don't realize that I'm also working with them neurologically. So, for example, the PTSD brain, when we look at brain images, it shows that the prefrontal cortex, I'm going to get real scientific here, the prefrontal cortex is hypoactive, and the limbic system, which is the memories and emotions, is hyperactive. So the brain's kind of operating like a teeter-totter with one side on the ground. And that, if you look at a dominant effect, that means that every decision is based on a memory or an emotion, which we see that stereotypically from veterans and other survivors. Mm-hmm. And so when we give them a guitar, they're very excited about learning guitar. We only have them do finger picking, and we teach them tab. Finger picking, it turns out that, and we have to, as a music therapist, you look at everything from a non-musical perspective and then find a way to put a musical spin on it. So the prefrontal cortex is responsible for initiation of fine motor movement. So therefore, we'd only do finger picking. The other thing that happens in the prefrontal cortex is the acquisition of new language. So when they're learning tab, it's a new language. And so we're boosting that part
To try to get that equilibrium, yeah.
Yeah. And then the brain can operate the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. And am I right that one of the exercises you do involves pulling the first string of the guitar in a way that can be reminiscent of another function?
So I have them take their index finger, put it on the high E string, pull it up towards the B string, feel that tension, and just hold it, and then lower it back down. Don't release it. And do that a couple of times. And 100% of the time, they equate that to the trigger finger. And it's that kind of that intimate feel. And so it's just, my line is always, if you have a desire to pull a trigger, I'd rather you do that with a guitar string. And so.
Yeah. And in this process, are these people who you're working with also writing songs? Are you using language? I guess it's the age-old question: which comes first, the music or the lyrics? Are there both things going on?
I feel like what we do is we set them up for success, which so many times we don't end up doing that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we do add some psychotherapy about identification and learning to be your best friend again, and just learning to like yourself. Our phrase is like yourself, love yourself, and trust yourself. So when we do that in the morning, and then in the afternoon we pair them with professional songwriters. And so I think what happens is we've started the process where we're putting the brain in the right position. We've already started the talking, and by the time they get to the songwriters, it's flowing. And and the other aspect, with music, besides the neurologic aspect, is being able to tell your story in a different way that gives you the ownership of that story. I tell them that if you do not brand yourself, others will brand you for you. So this gives them the opportunity to be in control of their story, of how it's told, how they tell it, and how they live it.
Can you give me an example of somebody who went through the program and for whom this was impactful?
Our most powerful story was a gentleman who came, and I'm not kidding when I say that his biceps were the size of my thighs. I mean, this guy was a monster of a guy, but he was quiet. He just very internal, but he loved the guitar. He kept sitting with the guitar and just playing, and he told me he was going to master this thing. And his story, he worked with a great songwriter, Buddy Monlock, and his story was that he was a guard in Iraq at the base in the tower, and he remembered seeing this little 8-year-old girl out playing in the streets.
Oh boy!
And then some men came and took her away, and then the next time he sees her, she's walking towards the base, and she has an explosive vest on. And they have either threatened her family or killed her family or whatever. And so she's crying, and he's yelling at her, please don't do this. Don't do this. And she keeps walking. So the first shot is at her feet. She keeps walking, and so he has to shoot her. And it saved his life, and it saved everybody in the base. But how do you make sense of that when you come home?
Right.
And so they wrote this song that the chorus is, don't dry my tears, I earn them. Don't drown me in them either. Just help me find my way through, the only thing that I could do. I mean, and those kinds of ways, and we talked a few minutes ago about, the first time you hear that, it's going to be real emotional and real painful and real raw. But the second time you listen to it, you find yourself listening to other elements. Like, I love the way the singer did that, or I love the way the guitar sounds.
Right.
So you haven't changed the story, but you've just changed how you hear it and live it.
Yeah. So it's an incredible opportunity for reframing some of these memories and these sort of experiences that are buried deep inside their bodies. There has been a lot of study and books published about the effect that music has on our brains. I know Dan Levitan is one who's written one successful book, but has the science changed much, or is it just like we understand that music is a good thing for the human brain, and has there been any big discoveries?
There's a lot of focus on kind of the behaviors that come from the music. I still really believe that the brain is the hardware and the mind and thoughts are the software. And if the hardware's not working well, the software's not going to work well.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, and hopefully one day we'll get a major study on this, but I truly believe that when somebody experiences a trauma that goes against all reasoning, whether it's abuse or an event, that it affects the health of the blood vessels in the brain. And I think music has that ability to create new neural pathways and improve the health of the blood vessels.
Yeah. We certainly know that music can bring people together and open their hearts at the same time, and that alone is powerful in this day and age.
Socialization.
Yeah, break down those borders.
Yeah.
Are you playing any music these days?
I've got a couple of great gigs coming up. I'm part of a John Denver celebration show, and we'll be in Nashville with the Nashville Symphony, and then we'll be in Denver with the Colorado Symphony.
Oh, cool.
In December, and we're doing a John Denver Christmas show. And
Are you going to get new glasses?
little round ones.
Yeah.
So we have a 5-piece band, and then the symphony orchestra, and then John will be on the screen, and they solo his voice and his guitar out.
Oh, wow.
And so we actually sing to him,
Wow.
and
Amazing.
I'll be backup vocals for him and everything.
Well, let me do two things. One, is there a website if people want to learn more about the work you're doing? Because we didn't really talk about. I understand you have Amy Grant's farm is one of the places where you work outside of Nashville and Franklin, and then you also are based in Colorado.
Based in Colorado, but
Yeah.
this year we've done 12 retreats in 6 states.
Yeah. And is there a website if people want to learn more about what you're up to?
Musictherapyoftherockies.org.
Musictherapyoftherockies.org. Okay, cool. Mack Bailey, last thing I want to ask you is, do you want to sing a song?
Only if you'll join me.
Yeah?
All right. I would love to.
Let's do it. Let's do it.